What is up, the pack of the wolves, wolf pack, who are probably tuning into this channel, or just general people who are curious about the building blocks of music, I guess, on a conceptual level. And this is more of a composition sort of deal, how to like take what's in your head and put it on. Now, strictly speaking, you don't need to know a lot of music theory. I'm starting with the staff paper because it's easier for me to start from there and talk about the note in general. I will show you an alternate view that you can use to compose with if you're using FL Studio or basically any other DAW digital audio workstation. If you if you've got some training and kind of know music and want to just learn a little bit more about chord progressions and various compositions, I will go over that as well in the future. I'm going to make this a little bit of a series. I'm going to put his name up here, but Kilagooge, my esteemed patron, has been a patron of mine for a while, done some good stuff, and was like, hey, I want to learn about music. I know you can do it, so make a video about it. And I'm like, well, that's a deep subject, so I'm going to make several videos about it. And I will thank him each time we do it. But yeah, this is Patreon Presents, I guess. And I'll be doing these in addition to my normal rotation, of course, for the next little bit. And we'll go from there. So what you see now is, if you're not familiar with music, you're probably like, well, you've probably seen this before. But if you're not, this is what's called the staff. And it's 5 lines, 4 spaces. And these symbols are what we call rests, meaning there's no note there. These are specifically whole rests, and I'll get into what that is in a minute. Over here, you'll see the clef. This is the fancy-looking treble clef, which just means it's the higher stuff. There's also the bass clef, and that's about all I'll talk about for right now. But there's a couple of different clefs. For right now, we're just going to worry about this fancy guy called the treble clef, and stuff like that. I'm not going to get too deep into this. I'm just going over this as an overview, because I don't want to take too long on it. But if you are curious, leave me in the comment section and I will do a real quick video really going over all the minutia of what a note is and why it sits on the staff. But as I said, I'm kind of doing this as just this is a primer here. There's a lot of different kinds of notes. Most of the time, a lot of music anyway is written in what's called 4/4 time, which means it's also called common time. If you ever see a sheet of music that just has a kind of a C right over here where the 4 is, the 4 over 4 is, that means it. So what that means is there is 4 beats per measure, and there are 4 4 beats per measure, and each measure gets 4 beats. So sometimes you can have 4 over 2 where each measure is like 2 beats. But basically that's there is different time signatures. But for right now, we're just going to deal with 4/4, which means, and I'm going to play this note here. This is what we would call C6. This is middle C. If you ever see a treble clef and see this written here, this is called middle C. So if anybody asks you about middle C, you're just like, oh yeah, it's like right below and needs its own little extra line because it's so special. It's so in the middle. That's C5, but this is just a little easier to read. This is called a whole note. And why is it called a whole note? Well, it's the whole measure. And one measure is 4 beats. So you'd be like 2, 3, 4, boom. And that's how long you hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Standard, pretty straightforward. I mean, there are other notes, of course. Definitely other notes that you can see. Basically, oops, wrong thing. Basically, that's a half note. So all it is you just add a little stem to that whole note, and it's now a half note, which means it's worth 2 instead of 4. And then you have a quarter note, which is, you fill it in, and it's half of that. And then, going down the line, and this is as far as I'll go. But basically, and then there's the 8th note, excuse me, there we go, 8th note. Oh wait, I have to make sure I do this. There we go, 8th note. Which is fancy looking. Sometimes you just kind of right there with the flag. Basically, it's open circle with a flag is half note. Filled circle with a flag, or with not a flag, but a stem is a quarter note, and then you add a little flag for the 8th note. If you have 2 8th notes, you kind of bar them together so they look fancy like that. And basically when you keep going down below this, you get you just add more flags. So it just, I mean, eventually you can get to what we call 30-second notes, which look like this, and that's a little crazy. And of course it's little nuts. So I mean, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, and yeah, and then whatever. I just added that for funsies. But so that's, I mean, that's just an interesting way to think about dividing notes. Now, I want to show you something over here, really quickly as well. And let me just make this a little bit more readable here. So I'm going to move away from the staff for a moment, see what you can sometimes do. And I wish there was a way for me to better divide these. Let me just zoom in a little bit on this. Okay. So this is what we call piano roll view. I mean, this is the same note right here. It's C6. You can kind of see it labeled right there. And so here's the whole note. I mean, you can kind of see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of, as far as I know, a lot of programs do label it like that. And I mean, this is 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's the second measure, and everything else like that. So you can see that. And then you can just see the note values. So, I mean, realistically, I just wanted to let you know what whole notes and half notes were in case you wanted to use the staff, in case you're familiar with that or you want to pass it off to musicians to play with. If you're just doing electronic music, I mean, generally speaking, you'll just be able to play around with this and say, okay, here's this go. And I wish I need to turn the snap back on because otherwise it'll not connect to where it needs to go. So you can just be like, you know, you can just compose it like that. And then if you were to try to hand it off to somebody, it'd end up looking like that on the staff paper, right? So that's how you can do things. We are actually going to move away from the staff now. I just wanted to let you know, because I will say things like whole note and half note and quarter note. So you kind of get a visual of what I'm talking about. And when you see that and you can kind of compare it to this, okay, a whole note and a half note and everything else looks like this. And I mean, it's just using the keyboard. So basically, quick lesson about the keyboard too. All of the white keys are just the note name. So it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If you start from C, but it basically just goes A through G. So it's only like, a few letters, realistically. So I wanted to make sure I let you all know about that as well. And then the black keys are different. And so that's, I mean, some of the basics with what you're looking at. And I just wanted to make sure I spent a few minutes going over that for those who don't know or just needed a quick refresher, and everything else. I mean, it's really easy to talk about. And if you have any questions, just go back again. All of the solid note names, if you ever see them written out like a C chord, you'll know is just all is white keys, and everything else like that. And then the middle keys are the in-between notes, and they have everything, they're what we call sharpened flats. So if you're going up from C, it's just C sharp, D sharp, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. I mean, some notes don't really have a sharp or a flat. I mean, they do, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But basically, for what we're talking about right now, that's what you need to know. Now, I'm not going to go up that high because that's annoying, so we're just going to use middle C as the reference point. So what we want to do now is I'm going to teach you a few things about chords. Now, because they're a real big building block in songwriting. So what I'm just made up here, oops, that's wrong. It looks correct because I'm used to looking at it on the staff view. So if you want to make a nice chord, and we're just going to use the C major scale for right now because the C major scale doesn't have any sharps and flats. So that's an easy way to get over things. It's an easy way to get concepts going. So basically, the reason I stacked it so weirdly on the piano roll is because I'm used to looking at like this and look at that. And then a nice looking, that is a C major scale. And it looks pretty. And it's a nice little do. Okay. And so that's what you want to think. So basically, a lot of things are based on scales. And major tends to be happier. All right, folks, you might be wondering why this cuts so suddenly. Well, I decided that an easy way to figure out what chord progressions are, or what I want to teach you, is for me to show you something I composed back in, oh God, let me look, 2004, or maybe even 2003, like ages ago. I'm an old man. Not really, but I wanted to show you something that I first did. And I did it in staff papers, so that's what I have up right now. And so this is easy. It doesn't get more complicated than this. I taught you already what all these notes mean. This is in C major, meaning it goes C, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's it. That's all the chords that are used. This sounds completely horrid. This is not a good piece of music by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an example. I mean, it's got melody, it's got a composition to it. So I wanted to make sure I showed you something that's very basic in a lot of ways, but isn't, like 12 bar blues or something else that most people would teach you, because I think that this is a little bit more interesting. So oh my God, here it goes. All right, so we're gonna dissect this piece by piece after we listen to it. All right. Well, that was supposed to be like an overworld theme for an RPG back when I was tiny and 13 years old. And I knew what I wanted to make, but I didn't know how to execute it. And so that's where it starts from. And so this is, you might make a few compositions that are similar in this regard, but those will be the first ones, and you show them to people you're friends with, and maybe publish them on forums like VG Music, like it did back in the day, because this was just a MIDI file that I made back in 2013, 2003, and back in the day. So why am I showing you this? Well, first of all, a couple of things. One, there's 3 different things going on here. I started with a pattern that is literally just starting 4 notes above the start of C, and I'm gonna pull up the piano roll for those people who just want to kind of want to see it as part of that, as you can see it next to the piano and everything else. So let me just pull that up really quickly here for y'all. Okay, and let me zoom in just so you can get a better clue. So this is the first line of the whole thing, and it's a simple patch. We're based in C. This is our bass note, and what you should know about scales, and we're just using C major because it's a lot of happy music is in C, or major keys. Pachelbel's canon is in D major, for instance, but this is C, so it's a different scale. But basically, that's what I want to get at there. So what I did was, me being the young guy that I was like, okay, what would sound cool is if we did this line right here. Yeah. All right. So that's just starting from 4 above and ending on C. So it's C. And then, the next chord we do is going to be just above that. Yeah. So we're just going to do the same thing. And, oh man. All right. That's what we're going to do. And so that was what I came up with first. And I was like, okay, so I want to make a chord of that. So when you want to make a chord from a key, you really just go, and this is called a try. And this is the simplest thing, easiest way to do it. There's all sorts of inversions and everything. We're not going to get into that today. Today is this is a C major note. And I'm going to just go to a different track here. Going to go to track 2 so we can see that. Okay. I'm going to show it to you. I mean, you saw this over here. The note is highlighted for you here. I just highlighted it on the staff. There you see, that is the C scale. So what you can see here is it kind of goes, and let me even maybe zoom in on that a little bit more for you. It's just literally every other note. It's just, that's one note. I mean, if you did it every note in sequence, it would kind of look, it would look like this. So that's more like, you know, C, D, but no, we do every other. So C, D, E is the next note in the chord, and then E, F, G, and so there we go. So that's it. That's how we build a simple triad. This is a major triad because we're in a major scale. So when you take a scale, again, the C scale is just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Straightforward, super straightforward. Thank God that part of music is easy. The minutia is not easy, but at least if you can know your ABCs and can start from C and stop it, like just restart once you get the G, you're all set. So there we have it. And so that's how you make a triad. That's a simple triad. Don't worry too much about the next chord there. But if you want to look at what that looks like on a piano roll, that's a basic major scale. Well, at some point I'll get into why there's different spaces here. Like it's not just an even looking thing. Because, I mean, there's 12 notes, and when you're doing it, yeah, anyway. But basically, so it's C, E, D, C, E, G. That's a C chord. So I was like, okay, so this is C. I'm just gonna go right up to D. Now, I didn't actually know this, but if you looked up a D major scale, you might notice that, or D major chord, you'll notice that the F is not just F, it's F sharp. So this is actually technically D minor for this next chord here. I'll just scroll right down. And that's how I started it. And this is all it was. It was 2 notes, right? But that's a workable chord progression. And it sounds, you know, it's not perfect. There's a lot of things going on. Things are kind of all over each other. This isn't super on arranging. It's just about like getting a bare bones started. So for a bare bones, it's not bad. You know, it's 2 notes. It's catchy. You know, I mean, if you added a, you know, it would have a little bit more drive to it if you added drums. But basically, that's a good way to get started. So that's 2 chords, and then this is where I screwed up. Is making the melody. Because if you're making a melody, you should kind of think of it like if you were writing a sentence. It should have commas. You shouldn't have a run-on sentence, because the melody that you heard a few minutes ago when we were listening to it was like one big run-on sentence. Okay, so we'll get into the basic construction of the melody now, and I'm just meant to show you down here just because it's a little easier to look at, I think. And it's a little easier to distinguish between what's going on with the melodies. But let me just make a small correction to this if I were doing it today, right? So we're gonna give these spaces right here. Those are notes to know that you have to rest, that you do not play there. There's no notes there. So and then we'll just do that instead. Okay. And then, and I'm just editing these values. There's a lot of different ways to edit the values, but I'm basically giving some more room to breathe on this melody here. And this is important just to remember, because even if you don't have all the notes kind of correct, if you have the rhythm correct in a lot of ways, it sounds a little bit better. Wow, doesn't that already sound a little less frenetic and ridiculous? I mean, the other thing would be too to let me see. Just give your music space to breathe. And I mean, I basically just need to turn down whatever the frig's going on up in this joint here. But so, I mean, I'm not here to. You're probably like, well, you haven't even taught me how to make a melody yet. Well, I'm getting there now. I just wanted to show you the biggest error that I made while I was showing you what was like before I even showed you what scales to use for the melody or how to construct a melody, because that's the biggest thing that I didn't learn until much later, that you need to give, you need to have commas, you need to have periods in your melodies. So that way, there's a chance for it to breathe and for the mind to comprehend it. Otherwise, this was just sounding like do 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 do. It's just like it sounded like, a bunch of Play-Doh being squeezed through a tube, which is not what you want. It's definitely preferred to, do it that way. So, this is a great example of how to write a melody, right? So here's why. I basically knew two things. There's scales and there's chords. And if you're playing within the chord of the scale, there might be some weirdness, but you generally can't go wrong. And this is literally that, because it starts with C, D, E. And what are those? The first three notes of the the C scale. The other thing that I did mostly get right is to not have too many big jumps in your melody. Because if you do, it sounds kind of wonky. So, I do have one big jump here, but I mean, I could probably just take that out and have a decent melody. So basically a nice rule of thumb for melodies, and this is just a rule of thumb. Music is all about learning rules and then breaking them as much as you want. So and see how that change happened too? Because now I kind of want to have this be a long note because I added that space. Oh my goodness, a long note, not a ridiculously short one. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's we're just going to deal with this first section here because it just repeats the chord progression. So I knew this was C, right? Okay. And so when you change chords in the same vein, in the same key, basically you just want to, the one way you can do it is just start the melody from whatever the bottom note of the next chord you made was. So as you can see, it goes from C to D, C to D, and that's the basic thing. It's just C and D. It's over and over again. So you're in the same scale, you're in the same keys, you didn't do anything super fancy, so you're just like D. And all that did is go up the scale starting from D. D, E, F, G, D, E, F, G. And that's it. And that's the melody. And that's a simple way to get melodies started, because what really makes a difference between melodies isn't so much the notes you use, because as I mentioned, there's only 8 notes, really, per scale. I mean, in general usage, if I get any smart Alex in the comments section talking about whatever stupid advanced theory bull S, I don't care. We're starting from the beginning, because if you don't start from the beginning, it gets confusing. So there you are. So that's the big thing. I mean, that's where it goes. So to recap, we have talked about what the different rhythms are. And I mean, this is a perfect example because it doesn't get any more than this. I mean, each measure had I forgot to go over ties. Basically, this means keep holding it. And you just, this tie thing here, just add those 2 note values together. So this is 2 whole notes as one. So it's 8 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. There you go. So what we see here is we have one instrument doing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And so I'll solo it real quick, actually. That way you can just hear what it's doing a little bit better. Oops. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this guy is, and the way you count these, I don't know why, is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so those are, those are eighth notes, an eighth of a measure. Doesn't that make sense? So there's 8 of them in the measure that you can fit in. It's actually pretty straightforward when you think about it. Thank God that some things in music are straightforward, because definitely not everything is. And I fully recognize that not everything in music is straightforward. But so as I was going over this, that when you have the tie here, it's going over. We have the rhythms. We know what the rhythms do. These are quarter notes. Again, like general rule of thumb, you'll have chords. I mean, if you're just doing a basic thing, the chords will be slower than the melody, but you might have that extra little line here that's like the or whatever, whatever tempo you choose. And then we learned that each chord is built from a scale, and a scale is literally just starting from a letter and going up until you hit that letter again. And since scale going up until you hit the letter again, and when you hit G in music, you just reset back to A. So it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or, if you're starting from C, so it'd be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Boom. And then we were using C because it doesn't have any crazy sharps or flats. So, but I will link in the description. For now, it's an easier just reference, a Wikipedia article on what different scales are, or some article that has different scales and what the sharps and flats are written out for you, not anything on the staff paper. And then we learned that when you're making a melody, give it some time to breathe and basically use scales, use any notes from the scale you're in for now. Again, this is just basics. Use any note from the scale you're in, and when the chord changes, you build the chord by taking the bottom note, whatever it is. So in this case, this next chord is D, and you go up 2 notes. So D, E, F is the next one, and then F, G, A is the next one. So that's a basic triad, is a basic chord, and that's how you build that. And you can start your melody from any one of those 3, generally speaking. So when the chord changes, you can basically make sure that your melody is hitting whatever your melody happens to be. It's hitting on one of those notes. In this case, I just had it start from D because that's easiest. So that's some of the basic ground rules. This has been a long video, but I wanted to make sure I had a big introduction for you all so that you can get started with this. If you were curious, if you were looking into getting into it, into composing. Because there's a lot of resources out there. If you want to do it with staff paper, feel free to get a Finale notepad, I believe, is still a valid thing. It's I think, free. It's got some limitations, but it'll get you started. So there you are. Thanks so very much for listening to me ramble today about notes. Any comments are greatly appreciated. That way you can tell me what you want to learn. And what you'd like me to focus on. And thank you again to my patron, Kilagooch, for giving every month to the Cyril Fund, and having the power to just be like, hey, I want to learn this. You make a video, boy. So there you are.